My name's Jessie, and for most of my adult life, I've kept my family at a polite GPS-verified distance. I work as a data analyst for a major healthcare company, and I've built a quiet, efficient little world around myself. A minimalist apartment, a few close friends, a six-figure salary that feels like armor, and an inbox I actually enjoy opening. It wasn't always that way. Growing up, I was the problem child, not because I got into trouble, but because I was inconveniently independent. My sister Chloe, 2 years younger and endlessly charming, was the family's golden girl. Every award she won was framed. Every success of mine was nice, honey, but don't gloat. Our parents, especially my father, had a strange obsession with appearances. They believed family unity was something you displayed like a curated Instagram feed, even if behind the scenes, it was mostly passive-aggressive silence and emotional bookkeeping. When I moved out at 19 on a partial scholarship and started working through college, they called it a phase. When I stopped coming home for holidays, they called it betrayal. For the past 5 years, we've communicated mostly through my Aunt Helen, the only relative who seems to understand the concept of boundaries. Then last spring, I got the call. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was knee-deep in a data set about hospital readmissions when my phone buzzed. Dad's name lit up the screen, a name that still made my stomach tighten like a pulled thread. "Jessie," he said, his tone clipped, businesslike, as if we were two executives negotiating a contract. "You're coming to Chloe's wedding." I blinked. "Hi to you too." "This isn't up for debate," he continued. "It's important for the family to present a united front." There it was again, the PR language of my childhood. Present a united front. Smile, even if your jaw hurts. I started to say no, that I was busy, that my work schedule was tight, but he interrupted. "If you don't come, we'll have to reconsider continuing your..." He paused, like he was choosing his next words from a stack of pre-approved phrases. "Your financial support." That part almost made me laugh. I hadn't taken a dime from them since college. They still believed I was barely scraping by, some low-level analyst renting a shoebox apartment. They had no idea that I'd been promoted twice in the last 3 years, that my savings account was healthy enough to buy a house, or that I'd been invited to speak at 2 industry conferences. I let a long silence stretch before saying, "Don't worry, Dad. My finances are just fine." He didn't respond right away. I could practically hear him recalculating his approach. "Then you'll come for your sister. She wants you there." That, at least, sounded plausible. Chloe always liked things to look picture perfect. A wedding without the estranged older sister? That would ruin the aesthetic. I said I'd think about it, hung up, and stared at my monitor, the tidy columns of data suddenly blurring into nothing. That night, I opened my old family group chat for the first time in years. Photos of Chloe in bridal boutiques, Mom's enthusiastic comments, endless heart emojis. My name hadn't appeared in months. Something in me, some old, foolish muscle of loyalty, twitched awake. I booked a flight home the next morning. The flight home was only 2 hours, but it felt longer. Every minute closer to my hometown was like rewinding an old VHS tape. Grainy memories, static, and that uneasy hum of dread before the picture starts to play. When I pulled up to my parents' house, it was exactly the same as I remembered. Aggressively beige with its perfect hedges and a brass plaque on the door that read the Monroes, as if it were a small law firm instead of a family. My mother opened the door in an apron, hair immaculate, smile tight. "Jessie! Finally!" she said, as if I'd just been late for dinner, not absent for years. She hugged me like someone performing CPR on a relationship that had already died. Before I could set down my bag, she was already assigning me tasks. "Chloe's overwhelmed, you know. You can help with the place cards, the centerpieces, maybe talk to the caterer. You're good with computers, right?" I hadn't even taken off my shoes. "Mom, I literally just got here." "Exactly," she said, breezing past me toward the kitchen. "We have so much to do before the rehearsal dinner." It was like stepping into a time warp. My family never did small talk or emotional warmth. Everything was logistics and appearances. My father greeted me from the living room with a curt nod over his newspaper. "Glad you made it," he said, as if I'd arrived for a quarterly report. Chloe appeared a few minutes later, glowing like someone who'd never known a day of doubt. Her hair was styled in effortless curls, her engagement ring a small disco ball catching the afternoon light. She squealed, hugged me, and held me at arm's length. "You look great. Still single?" There it was, the family icebreaker. I forced a smile. "Still single." "Well," she said, winking, "maybe you'll meet someone at the wedding. Elliot has tons of friends in crypto." Crypto. Of course. The magic word that makes certain men think they've outsmarted capitalism itself. She launched into a monologue about her fiancé, Elliot Brady, the crypto millionaire. They'd met at a charity gala, bonded over their mutual love of innovation, and apparently he'd already been consulting with my dad on investment opportunities. That last part made something in my stomach clench. "What kind of investments?" I asked. "Oh, you know," Chloe said vaguely, twirling her ring. "Blockchain stuff, very secure." I didn't press. Not yet. That night at dinner, I noticed how every conversation orbited around Elliot. My parents were enthralled. My dad bragged that Elliot had explained how to leverage decentralized assets, though I doubted he could define either word. My mom called him a visionary. Chloe called him her forever. When Elliot himself arrived later that evening, he was exactly what I expected. Tall, symmetrical, charming in that manufactured way of a man who studied charisma like it's an MBA elective. His handshake was firm, his watch loud, his stories polished. He greeted me with that salesman's grin that never reached his eyes. "Jessie, the analyst. Chloe's told me you're the brainiac of the family." "Analyst, yes. Brainiac, debatable," I said. He laughed a little too loudly. Then he launched into a detailed explanation of his crypto portfolio, filled with buzzwords and no specifics. I listened, nodded, and made a mental note. He's either delusional or rehearsed. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen counter with a glass of wine and scrolled through my phone. Curiosity won. I searched his name, Elliot Brady. There were articles, yes, but none of them matched. Different photos, different middle initials, a trail of deleted accounts and inconsistencies. He was like a man made of fog. The next morning, I found my dad in his study, papers spread out like an accountant's battlefield. Loan forms, mortgage statements, investment agreements, all bearing Elliot's signature. They'd taken out a second mortgage on the house. I stood there, heart hammering, staring at the numbers like they were a foreign language. My dad looked up, irritated. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "You can tell me what the hell this is." He bristled. "Elliot's helping us grow the family's wealth. He knows what he's doing." "Dad, he's not who you think he is." He slammed his hand on the desk. "Don't start, Jessie. Not this time. You always have to be the smartest person in the room." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked out. The sound of his pen scratching behind me, signing away security for a fantasy. The next few days were a blur of floral arrangements, menu tastings, and forced smiles. Every conversation with my parents felt like being gaslit by a corporate HR department. I was there in body, but my mind was running calculations. Elliot's business claims didn't add up. His stories shifted depending on who he was talking to. One day, he said he ran a decentralized finance consulting firm. The next, it was a private trading collective. His LinkedIn had no dates, no employees, and his company's website looked like it had been designed by ChatGPT's evil twin. Half buzzwords, half nonsense. Still, my family was enamored. My mom kept repeating phrases she barely understood. He's diversifying the portfolio. It's all on the blockchain. He's creating generational wealth. I tried to stay quiet. I really had. But one afternoon, while I was in the kitchen helping prep for the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Elliot convincing my dad to increase their initial contribution. "Just a small boost," Elliot said, his tone smooth as silk. "We're right on the edge of a major payout cycle." My father frowned, uncertain. "It's a lot of money." "Trust me, sir. The return is guaranteed." That was the line that did it. Guaranteed. The one word no legitimate investor ever says. Later that evening, I called my Aunt Helen. She lived 3 towns over, a retired accountant with a memory like an elephant and the emotional intelligence my parents lacked entirely. When she picked up, I didn't even bother with small talk. "Aunt Helen," I said, pacing the guest room, "what do you know about Elliot Brady?" There was a pause. Then a sigh. "So you've noticed." "Noticed what?" "That he's full of it," she said bluntly. "Your uncle looked into him months ago. There's no record of any real business. He changes names, companies, and addresses every couple of years. Always pops up with a new story and a fiancé." I sat on the edge of the bed. my pulse thudding. You're serious? Serious enough that I told your parents, she said. They didn't want to hear it, said I was being cynical. You know how they are. If something looks shiny, they'll call it gold even if it's fool's. I rubbed my temples. He's got them wrapped around his finger. I know, dear, but you can't save people who think drowning is swimming. She was right, of course, but logic doesn't quiet panic. I hung up and started digging. Every record, every trace, every forum post. Within hours, I found enough to make my stomach turn. Complaints, lawsuits, aliases, and one very convincing trail of financial fraud stretching back years. The next morning, I printed everything out, 30 pages of evidence. Names, bank accounts, business registries, old wedding announcements that mysteriously never resulted in marriages. The man had a pattern. He'd charm, promise, and disappear right before the ceremony, taking investments, savings, and trust along with him. When I laid the folder on the dining table in front of my parents and Chloe, they stared at it like it was a bomb. Dad, is this? What is this proof? I said. Elliot isn't a crypto millionaire. He's a con artist. He's done this before. Chloe laughed, a brittle high sound. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. I felt heat rising in my chest. This isn't about me, Chloe. It's about protecting you. All of you. You mortgaged your house for this man. Mom's face hardened. That's enough, Jessie. You've been negative since you arrived. You always have to tear people down when you can't control them. Dad slammed the folder shut. We're not interested in your theories. You think because you play with numbers all day that you can read people? I stared at them. These people who'd raised me, who taught me logic and caution, now hypnotized by a fraudster in a tailored suit. Fine, I said quietly. But when this blows up, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. I left the room shaking. Aunt Helen texted me half an hour later. You tried. That's all you can do. But it didn't feel like enough. It felt like watching a house burn while the owners argued that the flames were festive lighting. That night, I sat outside under the porch light, staring into the dark, listening to laughter drift from inside. Elliot's smooth baritone, Chloe's easy giggle, my parents' approving murmurs, the golden family tableau gleaming on borrowed light. And I knew something was coming. Something big. The morning before the wedding, the house buzzed with activity. Chloe was getting her nails done. Mom was yelling at the florist over the phone. And Elliot was holding court in the living room, explaining smart contracts to my father like a prophet unveiling divine scripture. I sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, pretending to be busy with spreadsheets. In truth, I was tracking the Bitcoin wallet address Elliot had given my father for investment transfers. It wasn't hard. Public ledgers are like diaries written in permanent ink. The address had been emptied the night before. Every cent gone. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when dread finally crystallizes into fact. I printed the transaction history, walked into the living room, and laid the papers down between them. He's already moving your money, I said. It's gone. Elliot blinked, the picture of offended dignity. Excuse me? My father frowned. Jessie, we've talked about this. Not this, I said, pointing at the printout. He cleaned out the wallet. I can show you the ledger entries. The money's been split across multiple cold wallets. You're not getting it back. Elliot gave a low chuckle. You don't understand crypto? Sweetheart. That's a reallocation phase. Cute terminology, I said, but the only thing you've reallocated is their retirement fund. For a moment, the room went silent. Then Chloe stood up, her voice trembling. You're ruining my wedding week, Jessie. You can't stand to see me happy, can you? I turned to her. Chloe, he's a con artist. He's been married before. Twice. Both times he disappeared before the ceremony. She shook her head, eyes wide with something between fury and fear. You're lying! Elliot reached for her hand, ever the gallant savior. Babe, don't listen to this. She's bitter, probably broke. That's why she's here, trying to poison everything. That's when something in me snapped. Not loud, but final, like a door closing forever. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward them. 6 figures. My name. My money. Does this look broke to you? The silence was exquisite. I make more than both of you combined, I said, voice steady. I don't need your approval, your inheritance, or this circus of denial. I came here because I thought family still meant something. Clearly, it doesn't. Dad's face flushed red. You've become arrogant. No, I said quietly. I just stopped apologizing for existing. I picked up my bag. Chloe was crying, Elliot glaring, my mother frozen mid-sentence. I looked at each of them in turn. He'll be gone before the wedding. You'll see. And then I walked out. I stayed at Aunt Helen's that night. She poured me tea like she'd been expecting me. You did what you could, she said. I should have done more. You can't rescue people who are in love with their own delusions, she replied. All you can do is step aside before they pull you under. The next 2 days passed like thunder rolling in the distance. I silenced my phone, ignored the family chat, and tried not to imagine Chloe in her white dress, waiting for a man who would never show. Then at 9:37 a.m. on the wedding day, my phone buzzed. One text from my mother. He's gone. No context. No punctuation. Just those 2 words. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set it down and exhaled. A long, shuddering release of everything I'd been holding. The numbers don't lie, but sometimes people do. When I finally drove back to my parents' house, the lawn decorations from the wedding that wasn't were still up. Half-deflated balloons, a white arch leaning sideways, the remnants of celebration turned funereal. The door was unlocked. Inside, it looked like a crime scene of denial. The dining table was littered with half-drunk champagne glasses and wilted roses. My mother sat at the head of the table, mascara streaked down her cheeks, staring at her phone like it held the power to reverse time. Dad was pacing, muttering numbers to himself under his breath. Loan amounts, equity values, the language of a man realizing too late that the math doesn't love him back. Chloe was upstairs, I later learned, still in her wedding dress. They didn't even look up when I entered. Jessie, my mother said flatly, eyes distant. He's really gone. I know, I said. I warned you. The words felt harsh as soon as they left my mouth, but I didn't take them back. Sometimes truth lands like a hammer because that's the only way it breaks through delusion. Dad finally stopped pacing. We lost everything, he said, voice hollow. The mortgage, the savings, your mother's inheritance, all gone. I sat down across from them, the weight of years of resentment and vindication pressing between us. How much? He looked at me with dull eyes. All of it. For a moment, I just stared at the wall clock ticking above the fireplace, every second a quiet accusation. Then I stood. You need to call the bank, file reports, get a lawyer, freeze what you can. Mom blinked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You can help us, can't you? You have money. You can loan us something. There it was. The reflex. Not love, not remorse, just the assumption that I'd clean up their mess. I took a slow breath. I'll help you find the right people. Legal support, financial advisors, recovery specialists, but I'm not giving you money. Dad's voice rose raw and cracking. You're our daughter. I was your daughter when you didn't believe me, I said evenly. When you told me I was jealous, ungrateful, difficult. You didn't listen then, and now you want me to fix what you broke. Mom's voice turned pleading. Please, Jessie, you have no idea what this feels like. Yes, I said, I do. It feels like being dismissed, lied to, and used. I've had 28 years of practice. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room with gravity, the sound of reality finally catching up. Chloe came down the stairs then, barefoot, mascara smeared, dress wrinkled and heavy. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. He left my ring on the nightstand, she whispered. It's fake. I turned to her and, for the first time since I'd arrived home, felt a pang of something other than anger. Pity, maybe, or the faint shadow of the sister I used to protect when we were kids. She sat beside me, sobbing quietly, and said, You were right. I didn't say I told you so. That would have been easy, but it would have been cruel. Instead, I handed her a tissue and said, Now you start over. And that's when I decided how I'd take my revenge. Not through rage or public humiliation, but through control. The kind of power that comes from never letting someone take advantage of you again. The next day, I set up appointments. Lawyers, fraud investigators, recovery consultants. I created a document outlining what steps they needed to take, who to contact, and what to expect. Efficient, emotionless, precise. Like a project brief at work. When they asked again if I'd just cover a few bills until things stabilize, I brought out a second document. It was a statement of acknowledgement, 3 short paragraphs, that they'd ignored my warnings, that they'd treated me unfairly for years, that they understood any help I provided would be professional, not financial. I slid it across the table. You sign this, I'll help with everything else. Otherwise, you're on your own. My father looked at me like I'd grown horns. You're blackmailing us? No, I said softly. I'm setting boundaries. It took them 3 days to sign. When they did, I scanned the document, filed it away, and began coordinating their recovery. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just worked methodically, detached, and untouchable. Because revenge, I learned, isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reconstruction, with you as the architect, not the debris. A year passed. Not dramatically, not cinematically, just one day after another, folding neatly into the next. Time is funny like that. It doesn't heal everything, but it sure rearranges the furniture of your mind. My family's house was eventually sold. The second mortgage had bled them dry, and downsizing was the only option left. They moved into a modest rental 2 towns over. I know this not because they told me, but because Aunt Helen did. She always told me the truth, even when it hurt. I didn't gloat. By then, the sharp edge of satisfaction had dulled into something quieter, steadier. I wasn't looking for their apology anymore. I just wanted peace. And peace, it turns out, feels a lot like space. I bought my own house that spring. Nothing extravagant, just a place that felt like mine. A 2-story townhouse with a view of the park, clean lines, big windows, and silence that I didn't have to earn. I hung my degree on the wall in my office. Not because I needed to prove anything to anyone, but because that piece of paper represented every late night, every ignored call, every moment I chose to keep building when they said I couldn't. I started mentoring first-generation college women through a nonprofit I discovered online. It was something small at first, a few hours a week, but it grew. These young women reminded me of myself at 20. Sharp, scared, underestimated. I taught them what no one had taught me: how to negotiate salaries, how to budget, how to read financial contracts before signing. Eventually, I built it into something bigger. A scholarship fund for academically strong students who didn't have a support system. The first check I wrote under my own foundation's name was the most cathartic act of my life, not because it made me feel powerful, but because it meant the cycle had finally broken. Aunt Helen came by one Sunday with homemade lemon bars, her usual peace offering. She looked around the house and smiled. "You've made a home." I nodded. "I have." We sat by the window, watching the light fade over the trees. She told me Chloe had started working part-time at a local boutique, trying to rebuild her credit. My father had taken a consulting job. My mother had stopped going to church, too embarrassed to face the gossip. "They're surviving," Aunt Helen said gently. "I know." "They still haven't reached out?" "No." "Would you want them to?" I thought about it, really thought about it, then shook my head. I want them to learn something. Whether they do or not is up to them. Aunt Helen smiled in that quiet, knowing way of hers. "You sound at peace." "I am," I said, and I meant it. Revenge wasn't the fire I'd imagined when I was younger. It wasn't fury or spectacle. It was the slow, deliberate act of rebuilding yourself so completely that their absence stops feeling like a wound and starts feeling like freedom. Every so often, I still get a pang of old grief, the echo of wanting to be believed, to be loved without conditions. But now when it comes, I let it pass through. I've learned that pain, when you stop feeding it, becomes fuel. Sometimes I drive by my parents' old neighborhood. The beige house with the brass plaque is still there, but someone else lives in it now. The hedges are overgrown, the curtains are drawn, and I smile, not out of cruelty, but out of closure, because I didn't need them to lose everything for me to win. I just needed to stop losing myself trying to make them see my worth. That was the real revenge. And it was beautiful.